It's interesting listening. I'm old enough to have been in and out of Mexico in their debt crisis and in and out of Argentina in theirs. The picture of the crossover between government performance, economic performance, and social cohesion has been demonstrated many times around the world. It's not new news.
No.
Joe, what's the answer? You presented the problem well, as is an economist's right. Now sing for your supper, if you please.
Okay. Well, on the one hand, no, you don't want me to do that, do you? I should back up for a second, David. I think you framed the question exactly right. And you have a case which is, quite reasonable. It presents a number of considerations that weigh on a decision. You want to try to balance them and figure out what the best choice is. And now all of a sudden, on top of that case, separate from its formulation, we're throwing in another major development. And the question is, how does this development affect your decision? I would imagine that up until a time like this, you would say that a creative, successful business decision maker presented with a case and then on top of that a new major development would instinctively say, I should look at what opportunity this presents to me. I think that what comes out of the exercise that we've been talking about so far here, the economic situation and Rob's and I thought I was a wet blanket, Rob's presentation of the likely consequences. What is striking to me is that I have a very hard time taking that case, putting on top of it the fiscal developments that are likely to transpire, and saying that something out of this is an opportunity. What is sad to me is that as I put those two pieces together, the development, the fiscal crisis that we are facing really just makes every option worse in important considerations. The one thing that you might say presents some kind of an opportunity, some kind of an advantage to one discussion or another, we've raised already, and that is if the dollar is going to decline, then that tells you that if you have imported competitors, they're going to become less attractive. If you have any opportunity to export, that should become greater. I think that when we're talking about this particular case and we're talking about glass and we're talking about breakage and we're talking about weight, I imagine that that's not so relevant, but if you're willing to stretch your imaginations a little bit, you could say, well, if the dollar is going to be lower, I might be better off than I would have been being here in the good old US of A, and maybe you would think that's a good thing. But I think if you expand your vision just a little bit, the decline in the value of the dollar that could transpire because of this kind of instability is quite possibly not going to be gradual in presenting us with a modest change in circumstances. It could very well be catastrophic. It could very well be extremely rapid in a fashion that could cause a lot of other problems for the firm. Are they borrowing to make this investment? If they are they large enough to get some kind of fixed rate financing so that the last fool buys their bonds so that they can build this facility? If not, if they're facing variable rates and we're looking at the possibility of a substantial decline in the value of the dollar and coming upon that a falling, shrinking market for U.S. Treasury securities, interest rates go up, you could wipe out any advantage that might have come from the decline in the value of the dollar. In addition to that, if the firm is importing its inputs, the decline in the value of the dollar is not an unalloyed, pardon the pun, benefit to their situation. So I look at all of that, and my first instinct is to say that the right response from our society is not to let this happen in the first place. Unfortunately, turning back the clock does not seem to be an option. But what I do take from this, and I want to build on something just very briefly that Charlie had to say, there have been times in the history of this country when business leaders have told truth, have gone to the leaders of the country and have told them that a responsible action, even if it might be painful, will be supported, and they'll stand up and say that, yes, the policy changes that you're talking about are not necessarily going to be fun in the short term, but it's something the country needs to do. That kind of business leadership, I think, is just from the nature of this case and this example, and if you think about what the consequences would be for the budget, for the investment that the firm is talking about, whether they build or buy, it really does, I think, drive home that the leaders of that firm would not only serve the public interest, but also in very much less than the infinite run, serve their own interest if they step up and speak out about what the country needs to do. So would I build or buy? I'll pass.